Hey gang, welcome to Two Blokes from Down Under. I'm Simon Guthrie. I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Ben Ennis. How are you, Benny?
Fantastic, Simon, and you?
I'm very well, thank you, mate.
That's good.
Ben, Season 2 of Two Blokes from Down Under is brought to us by Ken Muston Automotive. For all your motoring needs, pop down and see the team for Isuzu Ute, Ram Trucks, MG, Jeep, Subaru and Mercedes-Benz. That's Ken Muston Automotive, 215 Benalla Road, Shepparton. And Benny, this episode's brought to us by Extons of Benalla, proudly family owned and operated since 1952. Extons are your one-stop for all your earthworks, bulk haulage and equipment sales. You can find them at 85 Gilly Street, Benalla, or jump onto their website at extons.com.au. Benny, pretty keen for this next one. Sort of gets into the true crime thing again, so
Very interesting.
We'll give him a bit of an intro and then we'll get into it.
Go for it.
Our next guest spent 42 years in the Victorian Police Force and worked all over the state. He worked his way up from constable to a detective and worked on one of the highest profile cases Shepparton, Victoria has ever seen. After 20 years as a detective, he went back into uniform and performed numerous roles at the Shepparton Police Station. He's a mad keen sports follower, and there's no team more important to him than his red and blue Shepparton United Demons, where he is a life member. Welcome to Two Blokes from Down Under, Mr. Norm Gillespie. How are you, Norm?
Good on you,
Welcome.
Simon and Ben. It's nice to meet you, blokes.
You too.
So, Norm, it's a pretty unique sort of story you've got. As I said, you worked on a very high-profile case, which we'll get into a bit later. But where did it all begin for you, mate? Where were you born?
The Maripna Hospital, but don't tell too many people that. us Shep and Maripna people. But over there, the old base hospital back in 1951. And as a kid, my mum and dad both worked at the SPC, as everybody did then.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And as a baby, I'm told, I lived with Frank and Betty Phillips, the parents of Bevan Phillips, who I think you blokes might know, well-known bloke, squasher, in Old Dookie Road, not far from here. And then from there, Mum and Dad had a block in Rose Street here in Shep, behind that service station that's opposite the showgrounds now.
Yeah.
And from there, when I was about 8, I think Mum and Dad bought a house in Waddell Street near the St George's Road Primary School, and that's where I did my primary schooling. And then off to the tech school and the cannery and the cops and driving buses and retirement.
So I went to St George's Road. What tech school did you go to?
The only tech school back in those days was the one up on Verney Road and Balaclava Road.
North
Tech, yeah.
That was the only one there.
Yeah, the South Tech was opening, actually operating at the showgrounds when I left school in Form 5. I worked it out, I think that was in 1967. And then it moved down to Wilmot Road, Macquarie College. Yeah. But that was the schooling in my day. The primary schools based in Shep, the tech school, St Coleman's was always there in Knight Street, and the girls, they went to what was called the, would you believe, girls' school in Friar Street, where the TAFE College is.
Ah, yep, that's right.
Going back a few years now.
They wore those, I was going to say, ugly green uniforms.
When did the girls' school across from Notre Dame, also St Coleman's? There was one across the road, wasn't
it? Was
there?
Sacred Heart. They were side by side. St Coleman's one side, side by side. Sacred Heart with the girls, I think, and then St Coleman's with the boys. Yeah. And as we all know, in time they became St Notre Dame, didn't they?
Notre Dame, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
But as you know, things were obviously different with way less population back in the 60s, of course. But you know, it's a vibrant township, isn't it?
It is now, yeah, it's big. As Ben always says, you judge it by its McDonald's and KFC, and we're
I heard you say that,
we're getting bigger by that.
So
what happened at high school? Did you get into the sport or anything back then?
I was always loved my sport. My mum was I'll say, the 1935 Shep High School sports champion for girls.
Okay.
That's nearly 100 years ago, isn't it? Dad was very keen, although he was a New South Welshman. He was born and bred in the Wallerawang, Lithgow, Bathurst area of New South. Yep. And he came here with a brother to build, by horse and dray, Lake Mulwala.
Wow, really?
Back in after the First World War, because Dad was born in 1920. And then because Mulwala's so close to Shep with the fruit, everybody came here for the fruit seasons, and Dad and Mum met, and hence I'm here.
And he stayed.
Yeah, but I was always involved in sport through my mum, and Dad was keen on it. The St George's Road Primary School, well, he's a bloke you should get a hold of one day, is Desi Campbell.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He's same vintage as myself and Johnny Houston, and we grew up together.
Yep.
Cricket and footy were the day. And back in those days too, remember, the school teachers were a lot of them were blokes who were your footy and cricket coaches.
Yeah.
And living so close to the St George's Road School with the cricket nets and the footy oval, I spent a lot of time there. And with United Juniors, got smashed every week. You know, if we kicked a point, we'd be over the moon. And then, of course, going to tech school, met up with the St Coleman's boys who came out of junior footy. Most of them back in those days came to Shep United, and as much as we hated the Catholics then, we became best of mates, and we were premiers in 1967, and we've had friendships ever since. It was terrific times, happy times.
So how old are you now, Norm?
I was 71 in January, just 71.
Gone. Okay.
Yep.
So you're a little bit younger than what my parents are. So
I do remember your poor dad and your mum. I hope your family's all going well.
Mum's good, mate. So it's all good.
Good.
She's cruising along. So, so what did you prefer back then? Footy or cricket?
I was probably a bit better in cricket than I was footy, as much, even though I probably loved footy a lot more.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I think black and white tally the replays at 6 o'clock on a Saturday night, and I'd read about it. I knew all the. This is the day of Ron Barassi and Teddy Whitten and them. Yeah. But I represented Shep primary schools in cricket, and I remember travelling. I can remember travelling over to Bendigo to play the Bendigo rep side, and then when I was under 13, 14 or something, I represented Shep again. And then as you get older, you get other interests with tennis, and I played a lot of squash as a kid.
Girls and booze and rock and roll, isn't it? The Beatles. Yes. Oh, so you started your career, because it sort of leads into that now, you started your career as an 18-year-old?
Yeah, I left school at 16, went to the cannery and worked 18 months there, and I want to brag a little bit. Started off picking apricots off the floor on day one. The 2nd of January 1968, that was.
Yeah.
And I was offered a job. I actually ended up in the laboratory at the cannery, and I was offered a job to go to Hawkesbury to be a food technologist. But I realised back then I'm going to be stuck inside a stinking hot factory and working when my mates are playing.
Yeah.
So, but I was always, from 15, keen to join the police force. I had an incident happened to me as a 15-year-old, and I was helped wonderfully well by the late Les O'Keefe, who was a detective in Shep, along with a fellow name you might have known of, Simon. His grandsons played good footy with Kai. His name was Joe Ogden.
Oh, yeah.
Joe was the grandfather of Liam over at Kai, but those two particular blokes helped me wonderfully well, and from then I must have said, well, I'd like to be a policeman.
Yeah, okay.
And luckily enough, yes, I tried for cadets at 16 or 17, I think, and I obviously didn't make the cadets.
Yeah. So we'll tell everyone why that you had that help and everything like that, because that was 1966, the Mr Stinky case that happened in Shepparton, and you were pretty close to all that. So that drove you to become that police, or
I'm not so sure, Simon. I've been asked that question. I've asked it myself. Did that have a bearing on me joining the cops? I don't know.
Not sure.
But I've always had a real interest in being a policeman, and you'd really think that'd be a factor.
Yeah.
Because we'll touch on 1966.
Yeah, we'll go back to it.
Murders of Gary and Nabina, and I did know the families, and when we do touch upon it, I want to make mention of the fact that we've got to be mindful of the victims.
Without a doubt.
With this, because
for sure,
Gary and Nabina, they're gone, murdered, but it's the sisters and brothers and relatives that have left behind.
Yeah,
they're the victims, and they're the ones I feel so much for. We've got to be a little bit careful.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
With all respect to you guys and to them.
Correct.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
All right, so you obviously had some help with a couple of detectives. So you wanted to join the cadets, is that correct?
Yes, I applied for the cadets.
You're too young.
No, back in those days, 16-year-olds could go in and finish off their schooling, Form 4, Form 5. Back in those days, leaving was the big certificate to get, not so much matric.
Yeah.
And I think the letter said we want the best, and unfortunately you failed.
Oh, wow.
That's the impression of the letter I got, because I know I was disappointed. I really was, and I thought, oh well, bugger it. But I never gave up hope. I still was keen and applied for it, and luckily enough, as I say, I did go in as a skinny little 18-and-a-half-year-old.
Yeah, okay. And you graduated on the 19th of the 11th, 1969.
Have done your homework, haven't you?
How's that? So how long does it take to graduate, like back then? Like
4th of August, 69 I joined, so work this out, get your maths, get your calculators
so 2 months?
out. No, a bit longer. 4th of August.
So August, September, October, November.
19th December graduated. What's that, 5 months?
5 months. I've got November, 19th of November. You said December.
December.
Oh, I got my homework wrong.
Okay.
So 5 months takes you through to get to be a fully fledged police officer.
Yes.
And then what'd you do then? Like training is down in Melbourne at the academy?
No, I did it at St Kilda Road, the old depot it was called in those days, next to the old Prince Henry Hospital, St Kilda Road. I think the police hospital is still there on the corner, just down past the Arts Centre.
Yeah. That's
where I did my training, and fully fledged constable at nearly 19, December 69. Everyone back in those days, like myself, went to Russell Street.
Yeah.
And most of the duties were walking around bloody Parliament House on night shift. And foot patrol. But that was interesting. Foot patrol in Burke Street right on Christmas 69, that was busy, and all the old people pulling up young, fresh-faced constables asking them what tram do you get for such and such? Well, I wouldn't have a bloody clue. All I knew was Sydney Road and getting out of Melbourne to come home.
Yeah, to come home. Because there was no traffic lights back then, is that right? So the police did a lot of...
No, there were, because you guys would have heard the expression hook turn.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was big in Swanson Street, Melbourne.
Yeah.
And there were traffic lights, certainly right in the middle of Melbourne.
Yeah,
I don't know about out the suburbs or coming home. But, yeah, I remember driving a little Datsun 1000 fastback, and manual, of course, and I remember coming home on the first Friday night up the top end of Elizabeth Street and Victoria Street, and I'm riding the clutch and my legs shaking like buggery, and I said, will I go, won't I go, will I go, and I'll bugger it, so brum, off I went. And I think that taught me to be a crazy driver.
So how long were you at Russell Street for?
I think 4 months or thereabouts, and then I went over the road to the City Watch House, which was fantastic. Here I am, I'm just 19, and helping the Watch House keepers, which was a prison, looking after all the people that were getting arrested and going into the city court. Back in the day, anyone charged with a major crime ended up in the City Watch House to go to the Melbourne Court of Petty Sessions, it was called those days.
Yeah.
And our job in working in the watch house was to care for the prisoners and make sure they got to court, etc. I was there for 6 months or so, and then I applied for and went out to Footscray.
Do you have any famous people come through then?
I don't remember. I
Not sure.
Absolutely would have. Yes, I'll tell a little story about the good crooks, the very experienced professional crooks, let's say, that were in the cells. They're gangsters, moles, were bringing in beautiful Chinese meals.
Gangsters, moles.
That the prisoners never got. They had to be checked, if you know what I mean.
Of course they were.
Checked straight down
That's an
the
awful
stomach.
expression, but that's what they were. They were the gangsters' girlfriends, and
Yep.
I can't give you any names, but it was a bit hairy, scary. There were times where we had to go down, always go down 2 up, but there were times when you had to go down to get a prisoner out of a cell 3 up.
Yeah.
Which is this is before drugs came in, but there were still some pretty violent, tough, rough men back in those days. And, yeah.
How'd you go there as a 19-year-old?
Well, I had a really good. The bosses there were experienced ex-detectives, I think. One bloke in particular, and the other blokes that were experienced, and they knew how to speak to and handle prisoners.
Yeah.
And the general public, and they were there for that reason because they could.
They could, yeah.
And I think that was a good lesson I learned, how to speak to all people.
Early on,
yeah. Just because they're in cells doesn't mean to say they're not nice or whatever.
Yeah.
You still got to be respectful and nice to them, because you get more with sugar, don't you?
Well, you do. They're in there. You might as well be half decent to them.
Yep.
No point smacking them or anything, because it doesn't do anything for you.
Yeah, I have good memories of working in the watch house. I do. My word.
Yeah, that's good. So you moved to Footscray.
Yep.
What'd you do out there? I heard a little whisper that what you did out at Footscray was watch a lot of football games.
That's when my football career finished, because I worked at the Western Oval 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. was the shift, and then on the following I first lived in a flat in Essendon, and so it was arranged that I could work 10 till 6 at Western Oval, and then the next week Essendon were playing at home, and not that I worked, but I was there as a yobbo.
Yeah.
And that's where my footy career stopped. But I absolutely loved it. Footscray was a fantastic learning station for a 19-year-old. It was really good. It was tough, the old crooks of Melbourne lived there back in the day. Footscray was a tough suburb.
Yeah.
And then by the time I left, the Greeks were coming in, good people, don't get me wrong. And then the Yugoslavs came in, and then the Asians came in, and I think that's what Footscray's made up now, mainly, of Asian people.
Yeah.
And it's really good to go down there and drive down Barclay Street or go past Mount Mistake, the Rising Sun Hotel, and it's nostalgic. It's good. It was terrific memories. I worked with some really, really good, tough, strong street cops down there.
Yeah. So back in those days, Footscray would have been painters and dockers and stuff like that. Is that right? Or
Yeah, us and South Melbourne, we had competitions as to, who locked the most up or who got the most fights or all that sort of jazz. And it was a real good competitive thing. And, the Footscray crooks stayed our side of the river and South Melbourne blokes stayed over their side. It was good. I loved it.
They were tough old gangsters.
I was going to say, you're
Tough
still pretty young there dealing with that.
Yeah. How'd you manage to do that?
Well, back in the day, the old crooks knew you were a young cop.
Okay.
And they'd play you along a bit, but they were never violent towards you.
Yeah.
They'd kid you along and, you'd be con you. But you'd quickly realise that, because I very rarely was I the senior man.
Yeah.
Because I'm only 19, 20, 21.
Yeah.
Did they have a different kind of respect than the crooks?
Yeah, I think they did.
Yeah. And will I say that's still pre-drugs?
Pretty much. I think we had the American servicemen coming into Melbourne back then. I heard of Purple Hearts, and I think marijuana was out and about. I heard about it, but I never saw it. I don't think my first drug bust was, for years.
Okay. In
the mid-70s. Mid-70s, when I've caught some poor silly bugger with a little bit of hooch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just wasn't there.
Yeah. And we'll probably touch on it as we go through the years, but do you think it made a big difference, like that pre-drug period as opposed to when it came in, like
huge.
with the violence and stuff with your crims and...
Huge difference.
Yeah.
I think the violence has always been there, underlaying, and I've often thought the booze would bring the violence out, and marijuana would calm people down a little bit. And I've said to different ones, you get off the booze, mate, get onto the dope, because it calms you.
Yeah,
I've seen it calm people down.
Yeah,
and just as an aside, I heard about Olivia Newton-John, her sad passing just recently. In Australia, she was one of the very first to have a medicinal cannabis farm.
Yeah, okay.
To treat herself for her cancer. So must have some good qualities.
It certainly does. It's it's a good thing.
But I saw I did see a huge change with we talk about Sydney, the cops getting corrupted through the drug money.
Okay.
And, it's a terrible thing when that sort of stuff happens. But, we've had magistrates in New South Wales go to jail.
Yeah.
Premiers' names blackened because of innuendo, etc.
Did you see any of that?
I did, yes. I saw things that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, we don't expect you to name names or anything like that, but can you tell us anything that
Well,
happened?
it's just things where cops turn blind eyes, and there was payments.
Yeah.
This was in Melbourne.
Yep.
I never saw it in Wang or in Shep.
Yep.
And if it did, I would have done something about it because I'm against that sort of crap.
Okay.
It's wrong. But, you read about it in the books,
As a young 19-year-old, though, I suppose, and you're trying to look up to these cops, it's you wouldn't want to put your hand up and say, hey, he did the wrong thing there. You'd be sort of tarnished straight away, wouldn't you?
Well, you'd be sacked.
Yeah.
If you dobbed on a workmate or, you'd be shunned and you'd be sacked. You wouldn't stay in the job too much longer.
Yeah.
Whereas now they're almost pleading for cops to be whistleblowers.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Back in the day, you were loyal.
Yeah.
You were staunch. Anyway.
There is a fine line there too, though, isn't it? There's a fine line with the power that comes with being a police officer, and then do you overstep that boundary? And obviously taking a bribe is a different story, but, I suppose
there's many reasons for it. All the movies and the books you read.
Yeah.
It's understandable in some ways. I've heard it said that, the cops, for whatever reason, back in the day, the wages were no good. And if a policeman had some, 3 or 4 kids going to school with more expenses and, a quick quid came in, well, sometimes you'd think, well, no wonder they took it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so
whole other subject, that.
Yeah.
So you used to live in a flat at Essen. Did you meet anyone there?
I did. I met... Oh, well, that's where it's an important part of my life that I joined with my wife's brother. That's how we met. And...
how did he feel about that?
Well, we get on all right still after all this time. But he and I, we joined together in the very same squad. And after we graduated, both went to the Russell Street, and we both went and got stationed at Footscray, and we both went and lived together in this block of flats in Essendon.
Yeah.
12 flats, 8 of the flats were filled up with air hostesses.
Oh.
So coming home at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, having to have a debriefing beer, and the girls are coming in at all hours in taxis from all over the world, having to have a relaxing beer. We did meet some people.
That would have been fun.
And as I mentioned, my Liz's brother, he met his wife. She was an air hostess.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And they were married, and 10 years later, Peter went back. He didn't go back to, but he went to Brisbane with his wife. That's where she's from.
Where was he from? Was he Shepparton as well?
No,
or he's just a Melbourne. So you just randomly met him at the academy and become mates and stuff.
Joined in the same squad, and we chummied up. Same age, same interests. He was Collingwood, I was Essendon, but irrespective, I had a car, he didn't.
Yeah.
And one Wednesday night it was, Norm, can you run me home? I've got to get something at home, and went over to where they lived in Heidelberg, and my wife was there, and we met for the first time, and I can remember saying, wow, geez, she's all right. And so the next,
that's my sister.
so the next day, the next week, I said to Pete, do you want me to take you home again? Pete,
Oh, that's funny. So obviously got together with the future wife, and you moved back to Shepparton in 1973.
Yes, that sounds right. Yes, yep. Married in February 74. That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you come back to Shep as a constable.
Yes.
Yeah. What was it like to come to Shep back home?
Yeah, good. I wasn't what's the word? Wasn't a fish in a big wasn't a little fish in a big pond.
Yeah.
It was good because I knew people, and yet Shep was big enough to still be getting lost in.
Yeah.
Without everybody saying, "Oh, there's Norm Gillespie's come home," big cop sort of thing.
Yeah.
Shep was starting to develop. It was getting bigger.
Yeah.
And it was good because I did know people. I knew the good people. I knew some of the scallywags, and that was good times. I enjoyed that and made some good friends with the cops same age as myself and others that were senior to me. I had very good sergeants here when I first came home. Real good ex-detectives mainly, most of them. But that's who I took a liking to, those sort of blokes. No, it was good. Liz and I, we were strong, we were fit, we were active, and it was good times.
So you made your way up through the ranks a little bit when you come back. You went to a senior constable.
Yeah, I was promoted here in Shep, and the eldest bloke, Glendon, was born in 76.
Yeah.
And then a scare came out that to get into the detectives, if you've been in the police force longer than 7 years and hadn't applied for or got into the CI, you'd miss out. So I had to really think, wow, I've got to pull my finger out, because by this time I'd been in probably 6 years.
Yeah.
69, I graduated. Glendon born in 76, so there's your 7 years.
Yeah.
And so we had to up stakes, and I went back to Melbourne. Liz came with Glendon as a baby, went to Heidelberg Crime Cars, which was a stepping stone to get appointed to the CIB, which I did. And then, as a graduating constable, you end up in in Russell Street, and it was called the Bull Ring.
Yeah.
So I was a trainee detective. I was a fully fledged copper, but I was a trainee detective working at Russell Street CI.
So correct me if I'm wrong, when you say CIB, CIB is the former name for the crime investigation unit now, which is a detective. Is that right?
Criminal Investigation Branch.
Yeah.
When I was in it. Now it's the Crime Investigation Unit,
yeah.
CIU.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So then I got out to Reservoir CI, because we were bought a house in Watsonia.
Hang on, take me back to the Bull Ring. I've heard about this Bull Ring.
Yeah.
What was it like in the Bull Ring?
Oh, you could be... Oh, well, when you're attached to what was called Russell Street CIB, and you had to investigate all the crime committed in the CBD of Melbourne.
Yeah.
But there were times you'd get thrown into the breaking squad or the consorters or armed robbers or whatever, because you were the pool.
Yeah.
And that's where if they were short somewhere, you'd get grabbed and go in and work a few days or a week or whatever. And a lot of young detectives, that's where they ended up, because they liked it. They went into the breaking squad or the consorters or armed robbers, and that's where they stayed because they liked it.
Yeah.
But I didn't go into any of those squads. I actually, worked a little bit with homicide, and that's when I met a couple of blokes that actually came here to Shep in 66 as original homicide detectives, and I spoke to them often about what happened here. And I always had that in the back of my mind, speaking to people. And I'll tell you, this will be interesting to you guys and to listeners. When I went down to Melbourne initially, and I'm out in the depot, and someone would say, "Where you from, mate?" And I'd say, "Shep." "Oh, you from Shep? Wow." And we were known as a tough town.
Yeah.
We really were. We'd just come off the rotten bloody murders.
Yeah.
And we had a reputation. And, "Wait, you're from Shep, are you, mate? Geez, you must be able to fight." This sort of stuff, We were recognised as a tough town.
I did have my old man tell me a couple of stories where he used to bang on a little bit, so when he was a young bloke. So, but
we had that reputation, and especially those of us who grew up in Shep, because we knew both sides. We knew all the doctors' sons, and we all knew all the truck drivers' sons.
Yeah, that's right. So, okay, so we headed out to, where'd you go? You had a place in Watsonia.
Living in Watsonia and worked in Reservoir. Yep.
And worked in Reservoir. So what did you do in Reservoir?
Just general detective work, criminal investigation branch, and shift work, afternoon shifts now and again, and every now and again a night shift.
Yeah.
I was only there for, let's say 12 months, but during that time at Reservoir is when I went and studied for and passed detective training school.
Okay, yeah.
As mentioned, I was a trainee detective, but I wasn't qualified. You had to go and do another 12-week school.
Yeah, okay.
And so that's what I did when Anthony, our son Anthony, was born in 78, and I was doing bonehead. That's what was detective training school was called back in those. Anyway, I was doing bonehead, and Anthony was born. And it's ironic that the week he was born, we had exams that week, and I got the highest marks in that weekly exam was on sex offences. I remember that, and I remember getting driven home from the city out to where Liz was in a highway patrol car that come and got me, and nearly broke my neck with the G-force, tramping it.
Really?
Getting thrown back in these high-powered bloody highway patrols. Yeah. So 2 boys, fully fledged detective, and couldn't get out of Melbourne quick enough.
Yeah.
The big plan was to go down there, get into the CIB, stay in Melbourne until I became a detective sergeant. That was the plan I wanted to do. But after a couple of years back in Melbourne, I
just had enough.
Yeah, I really had.
Country was calling.
It was, yes.
Yeah.
And Mum was by herself here in Shep, because my old man died at the age of 53, and that was an excuse, I suppose, to go home closer to Mum.
Yeah.
But, I had enough of Melbourne. I hated the bloody traffic and other things. I missed home, I guess. Mm. So off we went to Wangaratta in 79. Okay.
So you went to Wang as a detective?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. What was it like?
Well, it was going from 100 miles an hour at Reservoir to walking backwards.
Really?
Yeah, it was just so slow.
Not much crime over there.
No, not compared to where I'd come from at Reservoir. And, I mean, the first day or second day at Wang, the sergeant says, well, this is about 10 to 12. Come on, Norm, quick, we're going. I said, we're going. So there was the 3 of us, the sergeant, me offsider and me. There's only the 3 of us, sergeant, 2 detectives. Anyway, he said, you drive because you live the furthest away. Drop me off and then drop Bucky off, other bloke, and then pick us up about 1 o'clock. Lunchtime.
Oh, you got excited thinking you were going to a job?
Going home for lunch.
Really?
Jesus, that never happened where I'd come from the last 3 years. But Wang was good. We had a terrific area. We covered Myrtleford Bright, Mount Buller and Mount Buffalo, Mount Hotham.
Yep.
We didn't go as far as Wodonga because they had their own detectives. But now, they had detectives. But by being in Wang's 100 k's from Shep, hour and a bit in the car, and I was backwards and forwards, seeing Mum and seeing me mates here in Shep a hell of a lot. And I was, really, really, really busting. I wanted to come back to Shep.
Did you get any profile cases all over in Wang, or like what was the biggest thing you did? Someone stealing some clothes off a clothesline or something?
Oh, no, we had a couple of real active crooks that we had to sit on for quite a while. And that took for probably 3 years before we got them.
Oh, really?
We had some big highway robberies. And I was involved in, believe it or not, the downfall of the Griffith mob, because I was working when we got a call one night to follow a Mercedes and a brown Ford Falcon. We picked them up at this side of Albury, Wodonga, and we followed them right down to Camp Road when they were intercepted, and the back of the Ford was absolutely chock-a-block full of cannabis.
Mm. Who was driving?
A fellow named Robert Enterkin, but in the Mercedes was a fellow named Gianfranco Tazzoni.
Yeah, okay.
Who was the bloke that spilled the beans on Griffith.
Yeah.
what was his name?
Aussie Bob. Bob
Trimboli,
Trimboli.
and McKay's unsolved murder.
Yeah.
And that was just because I was in the right place, right time. But Wang, any crime that the uniformed boys didn't have enough time to investigate. Well, that's what detectives do. You specialise in the major crimes, I guess.
Yeah. But
general run-of-the-mill detective work in Wang, but doing a huge amount of miles. Yarrawonga was in our area, Rutherglen, and you'd be in Yarra and you get a job to go to Bright. Back in the day, that's what you had to do.
Mm. So you had another son in Wang. You had David was born.
David was born in 83, that's right. Yep, in Wangaratta.
In Wangaratta. And then 84, you moved back to Shep. Got your big chance. How did that promotion come?
Well, it wasn't so much a promotion, Simon. It was in that time it became known that fingerprints had been identified in Melbourne, matching the same two prints that were left on Gary Hayward's car here in Shep.
Yeah. And
I was aware through that there was a task force being created under the leadership of Detective Senior Sergeant Dennis Hanna.
Okay, yep.
He was the OC officer in charge of Shep CIB that took that job on, and we had another wonderful leader, the late Dallas McDonald, and Dallas gave authority to Dennis Hanna to create a task force to not re-investigate, but get back involved in the investigation of the double murders here in Shep. And so I put pressure on, and I got back over here to Shep to work on the case, because by this time we're starting to realise that we could solve the double murders. And I knew a lot of people, as in I knew that, let's say, a person with an Italian name was 5'3".
Yeah.
And he wasn't redhead, because by this time with the rape victims, they got together and created a effigy of Ray Edmunds.
Yeah.
With the size, the body weight, the hairstyling, the colour, everything. And we knew that he wasn't a little Italian or a 6'9" American Negro, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we eliminated so many people, and that's why I came back to Shep by saying, well, I can help here, and I want to help. I want to get involved. And so Liz and the kids came over officially. I got an official, transfer, gazetted transfer in 84, but I was over in Shep back here in 83, going to Melbourne a lot, interviewing and speaking to all the rape victims. We linked to say it was the same offender for all those girls.
So if you don't know what we're talking about here, this is the Donvale rapist is what they called him.
That's what he was called.
That was his tag,
originally,
which was found to be Raymond Edmunds, which was the back to the same case. That's where it linked back. So okay, which we'll get into a bit later. But okay, so you came back purely for that case, and then obviously you were back here for a few years. That got solved, which we'll go into later, but...
it was 85, he was arrested,
Yeah, 85 was it, or 86?
85, I think.
You'll know better than me. I thought it was 86,
March
20 years or something. But
March, anyway,
Yeah. All right, then being a detective in Shepparton, you would have seen more crime than Wangaratta, probably not as much as Melbourne.
He's 3-time Wang's figures.
Yeah, okay. Did you see anything that, like, come across things that were hard to deal with and stuff, or?
Yeah. As the detective, and back in those days, not every weekend, but often you were the on-call detective after hours and weekends, and I went to some pretty horrific crime scenes and sadness. Yeah, I did. And back in those days, the coping mechanism was grog.
Okay, yeah. Because there wouldn't have been any psychologists or anything like that back then?
No.
So what, that's finish your shift and go to the pub?
or down the riverbank or somewhere, someone's house, and if the pubs were not open, I mean, back in those days you could find grog.
Yeah, okay.
If they were closed, but that's what we did. You'd have a few beers together, and you probably may have heard the terminology of black humour.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff, standing around a fire, drinking and shy-acking, and you know, you look back and think if someone was over in the shadows, quiet, he's thinking deeply about something. But if you got the village idiot being drunk and doing handstands and push-ups and all that sort of crap, well, he's getting it out of his system somehow.
Yeah, okay. So that's what you did? That's how you coped with it?
And because, it happened a fair bit, and we became a brotherhood, became closer and more loyal and staunch with each other, because you were sharing things that you couldn't explain at home or to anyone else. You just
because you all knew the same thing. You'd all sort of seen the same things, and it's easier to talk about. And you don't really want to go home and tell your wife all those things that happened and your kids, do you?
You just don't. You just keep it to yourself. And I saw changes in the police force too, like when I got out of the CI and I was involved at the police station. But the cops were going to fatalities, and they were coming back in at 7, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning and sitting down and taking a deep breath, and within the next 5 minutes, 19, 20, 30-year-old psychologists are up from Melbourne talking to them. And geez, I took exception to that. I said, let them do it their own way.
Yeah.
You can come in tomorrow.
Yeah, you got to give them a little bit of time to debrief it. And
so that's how things changed, where there was nothing, and then all of a sudden they brought in these trained psychologists that, in my opinion, knew nothing. And they were talking to the cops that were suffering.
Yep.
And so later on we might talk about that I became what's known as a peer support officer.
Oh, okay, yeah.
With my experience, because I had a bit of a breakdown in 91 from the grog and from what I'd seen, I think, that built up on me. And I thought, like, I was helped by the police force. Yep. Others would have been sacked, but I was helped.
Are you right to talk about that?
Yeah, no problems.
So obviously, you know, you'd get with your mates, you'd have a beer and stuff. Like, did that go too far? Is that?
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
I was prone to do some silly things on the grog.
Yeah, okay.
But in 91, I was helped by the cops rather than sacked. I was rehabilitated. Services were offered to me, and I took them, thank Christ.
Yep.
It was the best day's work I ever did that day in 91. And so I saw how things had changed over the years, and my last 10 years in the police force, I helped a lot of cops. I think I did.
Yep.
By just going to them and saying, how are you?
Yeah.
You know, now we talk about, are you okay? And it's all right to talk.
Yeah.
I'm a believer in that.
Yeah. No, it's a great thing. I believe so. It's really good. And I mean, the police force, obviously, you know, it's not just the police force too. It's the fire brigade, it's the ambulances, the search and rescue. They all see things that most people can't acknowledge and don't want to see, sort of thing.
Well, when I joined the police force back in Melbourne particularly, there was sports of great level up, but in my day, the police had their own team, so did the fireys and so did the ambos.
Yeah.
And on Wednesdays they played, and the fireys would play the cops, and after the game they'd all get on the booze, have a barbie and talk, I saw you last Saturday night at that bloody fire out at Yarraville and this sort of stuff, and they could talk about it and, you know, get together and get through the trauma that what they'd suffered.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty...
those things have just gone by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But just being in Shep and being a detective and stuff like that, was that difficult, like you said before, you do know people?
No, not difficult.
No?
No. I've said, and I think I'm pretty right in saying, the people I knew were good people.
Yep.
They're not going to be involved in bloody crime or drug trafficking or domestic violence.
Yep.
And... yeah.
Did you ever arrest any of your mates?
Not close mates, no.
Associates of some description?
One bloke I'm thinking of now, I had to, but he did the wrong thing, and he, to his credit, he confessed and paid back, and has never committed crime that I know of since.
Yeah.
And they're good results when you... I was thinking about a case driving out here tonight about a bloke that I don't think's ever been in trouble since he got out of jail.
Yeah, okay.
And I've seen him, let's say I saw him 2 years ago and I said, "G'day, how you going?" He said, "Oh, good, thank you." And I thought, good on you. You know, you've grown up, and obviously jail did him the damn good favour.
Yeah.
But I don't think jail does anyone a favour anymore.
No, it's most people who go in now reoffend and reoffend and reoffend sort of thing. So, yeah, there is the occasions that it does help out, and well, it's themselves that do it. They pull their heads in and go, "I don't want to be here anymore.
Correct.
Just let's get out." So, so you retired from being a detective, obviously in '91. So, when your little episode happened, that was the end of detective, or?
I knew if I went back into the CI, I'd probably drink again.
Okay.
Because I had 6 months off work, getting better, getting off the grog and getting my head right. And I was told you can't get too tired, too hungry or too thirsty. One of them you do, you're going to drink again.
Okay.
And look, I don't know how it happened, but there was a job created. I've said, a bit of ego, that job was created for me. There was an office opened up in Shep called the District Information Support Centre, which was a forerunner to crime intelligence collection and dissemination. And I applied for it, and I got the job, and I said, well, I'm the right man for it, because I was interested in that sort of stuff. I read the John Douglas book, Mind Hunter, from FBI and Profiler and all that sort of jazz. Yeah. And so I opened up the disc office in Shep and loved it. I really did. It was then it got too much for me, because Shep was just too big and it was too much for one person. Yeah. So I argued with Len Taylor and others to give me more help. But I battled it out, and I got out of that for a while because I was frustrated. And it was one of those jobs where people who were younger than me, who'd never been into detectives, came to me and told me how to do my job. And I got really pissed. I did. I got annoyed, and I said, well, you can stick this right up your clacker, I'm going. And I did general duties. I worked on the front desk at the Shep Police and over at Maripna for a couple of years, and I enjoyed that. Yeah. And then my real love was being in the disc office, so I went back, and that's where I stayed till I finished, and that was 6th of no. What you've got it? Have you got it written down there?
As in when you retired?
11th of June.
No,
to 11.
4th of June.
4th of June. 4th of June to 11.
Yeah.
So that's just over. What's that? Just over 11 years ago.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Just over 11. I'll just go back a little step. When you worked on the front counter at Shepparton, you worked with a policeman by the name of Frank Eyre.
I did.
So Frank had, I'm going to go out on a limb because I don't know much about Frank, but he'd been a police officer for a long time as well, yeah?
Correct.
And Frank's son was tragically killed in the Wall Street murders, and that was 88, is that right?
Damien and Steve Tynan was shot down, 88 in Wall Street, South Yarra.
Yeah. How did he cope with that in regards to, like, he stayed in the police force? Like, it's a big thing, I reckon. Like, it's
for sure.
Frank was absolutely brilliant to be able to come back to work after Damien was murdered, and for the offenders to get off. That's another kick in the guts. Yeah. That hurt. But Frank was so supportive to other police that were in strife, and it kept him sane. Frank will tell you that himself. Staying in the job kept him sane to talk to the young cops. He was revered because of not only what he'd been through, but just the way he could speak to people. The front counter and the prisoners, Frank was terrific. And I'd known Frank for a long, long time before we actually physically worked together. Yeah. And I stayed on, let's call it the front desk and in the watch house at Shep because I was with Frank for all that time. And I count myself lucky in that I'd wake up and say, oh, Butte, I'm working today. Frank's
with you.
I'm on with Frank, you know.
Yeah.
And it's a great feeling to be able to go to work, wanting to go to work.
Yeah, that's right.
For sure.
And
Yeah, okay. Because he was Frank was a young constable back in '66 in Shepparton back then. Is
Yep.
that right?
Correct.
Yeah. Gee, I've done my homework.
Oh,
haven't I?
you're all over it.
I'm all over this true crime stuff. So you gave up. You finished 2011, pulled the pin, had enough.
41 years and 10 months it was.
That's a long time.
And people will say to me, why didn't you make it exactly 42 years, you know? Rounded off 4th of August 69, 4th of August to 11. And the answer is,
Who cares?
I run out of bloody sick leave.
Oh,
I've seen a doctor how long? For quite a while.
yeah, okay.
I don't think I worked for 18 months before my actual resignation date.
Yeah,
But I cut out a bit of long service, but I certainly used up all my sick leave.
yeah.
Because back in the day, you just foregoed it. You just lost it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I'm told that if you go out and you owed 100 days, you get paid 100 days.
Really?
Yeah. The Police Association have been fighting for it forever,
Yeah,
and they
okay.
finally got it. It might be half. You owed 100, you get paid for 50, something
Yeah,
like
okay.
that.
Yeah, okay.
Something worth keeping sickies up your sleeve
Not
anyway.
bad.
No,
Some
that's-
some bosses take them off you at the end of each year.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I don't do that.
Don't comment.
I don't do that. You show me a doctor's certificate, I'll pay you. So, unbelievable career, 41 years.
That's a
It's-
long
it's
time.
a long time, isn't it? I suppose the beauty of that in the police force, yes, you've been a police officer for 41 years, but you get to do different things. So
Yeah.
it's,
But seeing so much in
Yeah.
over such a long period of time.
it's pretty crazy.
Well, I recommend it to any young bloke or any young person that's thinking about it. Don't think about it, do it.
Yeah,
Because the opportunities you can go and drive motorbikes or ride horses, skidoos,
yeah,
or whatever, speedboats, aeroplanes, anything you want in any part of the... And we have got a wonderful, beautiful state. You know, 100 miles away is the snow, and another
Yeah.
40 miles up there's a beautiful river, and
yeah.
we've got everything here.
True.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So what do you do now? Just plod along.
I'm a retired gentleman,
Retired gentleman.
although next week I'm going back to drive school bus for a week.
Yeah, okay.
I did that for the 10 years I've out of the police force, and I'm so pleased I did it because it's a transition into being retired from being flat out forever.
Yeah.
So I started work. You forgot about me being a paper boy.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I didn't have that one written down.
For 5 years I went to tech school.
Yeah.
I did a morning paper run.
Yeah,
So
okay.
I started work at 13
Yeah.
for money. you
Yeah.
know. And I worked right through from 13 to 65 or something. But I'm busy. Like I've joined. Like I'll promote where I live right now. It's the Lifestyle Village here in Channel Road, Shep.
You've just been promoted, I heard, at the Lifestyle Village.
I've
Got
been
yourself a gig.
appointed to the homeowners committee on behalf of all the homeowners if they've got a squabble with anything, and if management can't resolve it, we as a committee put letters towards the big owner blokes. But it's a terrific place. We've got everything you want in life.
that's
You don't
right.
have to travel.
That's good. Well, we'll touch on your sport a little bit. I won't be rude, but I heard you weren't that good at sport, so that's what I heard. So
Okay.
you can blame someone close to you for that one. So, but he did say you loved your sport. Don't get me wrong, but you followed footy religiously. You followed the Shepparton United Football Club.
I did.
You did. You don't really do it much anymore.
No, we're with youngest blokes involved out at Shep East.
Yeah.
That's where we've been going when he's been at Shep East, and when he was playing Bush Rangers, we
Follow him there.
followed him around the state.
Yeah.
And when he was played at a place called Sylvan,
Yeah.
2 premierships there, and a premiership at Maribyrnong with your cousin Mark Bullen.
Yeah. So we interviewed Mark, and Dizzy was pretty dirty, so Dizzy's
Didn't get a mention.
So he was pretty dirty that Bully didn't mention him.
Oh, well.
2 years out at Silver with Bully and one at Maribyrnong.
Three flags.
3 flags.
Didn't even bring one of the old Shep boys into the story.
Didn't get a mention.
Well.
So Dizzy.
Well, you're getting a mention now, mate.
He's got every right to be dirty.
So where David's been, he had a year out at Dundee some years ago, and that's where we've been, you know.
Yeah, you've been following him.
All the way through. I mean, United's been my GV club for sure, and as you mentioned, I'm a proud life member of United. I was secretary in our halcyon days, 87, 89, we won the 3 flags.
Yeah.
After losing 3 flags, remember we were in 6 grand finals on the trot. Lost 3, then won 3, and I've mentioned the president I was secretary to, a fellow named Ian Marrett.
Oh, yeah.
Known right throughout the breadth of the land as Slab. I wonder why. But a champion man, and we were happy. While we were happy footy club, happy work environment, you'll do well.
Yeah, that's
no
right.
question. And where we're living now, we're happy, so we're doing well.
Yeah.
And that's such an important part of life.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, well, we sort of touched on that, so we do want to touch on the other thing that we brought up at the start. So I'll just read these out first. So Season 2 of Two Blokes from Down Under is brought to us by Ken Muston Automotive. For all your motoring needs, pop down and see the team for Isuzu Ute, Ram Trucks, MG, Jeep, Subaru, Mercedes-Benz. It's Ken Muston Automotive, 215 Benalla Road, Shepparton. And this episode's brought to us by Extons of Benalla. Proudly family owned and operated since 1952. Exton are your one stop for all your earthworks, bulk haulage and equipment sales. You can find them at 85 Gilly Street, Benalla, or jump onto their website at extons.com.au. All right, Norm, so we're going to go back to the this high profile case that happened in Shepparton. It happened back in 1966. You were 14 or 15?
Just turned 15 in February 66, yep.
Yeah. So, story goes that there was a concert on. Shep was pretty renowned for its concerts back then, with the Civic Centre being built. You probably tell the story better than me, so I do know a bit about it. But what was it like back then?
Well, as I just turned 15, involved with tennis and badminton at the St Andrew's Church complex, and it was there I was friendly with Roslyn and Abana Medill, our teammates in both tennis and badminton, and their friends, girlfriends, and my best mate then and now, Johnny Houston, and we were the gun tennis players, and this is, Rick's no good in sport. We won some flags in tennis as well.
He's
Who's
correcting you here.
Bloody David. But anyway.
He's going to get a whooping.
And life was fantastic. We were part of the St Andrews, what was called then the Presbyterian Fellowship Association, which was for kids.
Yeah.
We had a wonderful minister. We had snow trips, and we had just, 15-year-old kids were so full of life, and I look back and I know that I just loved living. It was exciting. Yeah. Everything was good. And so now you're taking us back to then. And yes, Shep was huge. Saturday nights, every night there was a dance at the Civic. We called it the Civic Centre back in the day, and it was only just new.
Yeah.
Now it's known as Riverlinks, isn't it? Or East Bank or something like
that.
Whatever. It's in Wellsford Street. It's the town hall.
I remember it's the Civic Centre.
Same.
And on a Saturday night, you'd be standing on the dance floor, and the whole floor would be thumping. You could feel it vibrate with the kids stomping. It was a popular dance, but we had Australia's best bands on stage, and it was, as written reports say, there'd be 2,000 kids there. And every now and again, midweek, on this particular night, Thursday, 10th of February, was a concert. Now, there was no big Roland Storm was one of the performers, which Melbourne artist, a bloke named Billy Adams, came up. He was on the Go Show. People might remember the Go Show, and I think Johnny Young had a show on TV back in the day.
Okay. Yep.
And it was this is Beatles time.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there's magazines. Go Set was a magazine, and Carnaby Street in London was huge with fashions and stuff. But Shep was big and it was rocking. And on this summer's Thursday night, we had a carnival in town on the lake, rides and fairy floss and all that sort of stuff. And it was the height of the fruit season. With probably 1,000 itinerants from Queensland picking our fruit and working in the cannery. So Shep's a buzz, it's really vibrant.
Yeah.
And, I know I went to the concert. I'm 15, I can remember going. And then the next day, the next week, the next fortnight, I can't explain. It was just, where are they? So they're missing. I know I can remember saying they hadn't run away together.
Yeah. A
lot of people didn't know them, and that lot of theories. They've run away together. But if they did, why is Gary's car still in Shep? And you talk about Frank Eyre, he was a policeman here in Shep at the time.
Yeah. And
he found Gary Hayward's car parked funnily, not properly, incorrectly, in Wyndham Street, opposite Summer Avenue there. Oops.
So if you don't know, his car was an FJ Holden.
Yep.
British Racing Green, and it was his pride and joy. Loved it. And when they saw the car there, it's like, well, he couldn't run away because he would not take it out.
Yeah.
That car is his and he loved it so much, sort of thing. So, so without going into too much of that, like those two and what their relationship was, obviously, how do I pronounce her name? Is it Abina?
I've always said Abina.
Abina, okay. I'm going to say Abina because that's what I know. So same sort of thing. But she had a boyfriend at the time.
Well, Ian Urquhart was known as the boyfriend.
Okay, is that not right or?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, Abina was a year or so older than me.
Yeah.
I wasn't paying much attention. He's always been referred to as the boyfriend. And he's a bloke. I mean, his sister's still here in Shep, and he's got relatives in Shep. You've got to be careful here because poor old Ian, he was...
Oh, yeah, terrible.
He was monstered. He was, some of the old homicide blokes said it was him.
Yeah.
And he tragically went 6 years to the day after Gary and Navina went missing up in New Guinea or somewhere overseas. And he was hounded, and back in the day, I think police investigated differently than what they do now. And there was a sense of unease around Shep, and then, of course, 16 days later, the bodies were found down Murch East.
Yeah.
And then everyone knew then it was double murder.
Yeah. So Ben, you don't know a lot about this story, but you know a bit of it. But so the two went missing that night, couldn't be found. Car was found.
Yep.
And then didn't know what had happened.
Not for 16 days.
Yeah, 16 days.
There was someone bushwalking or something.
So there was a couple of young kids come up from Melbourne to go rabbit shooting at Murch East. I think one of those kids, their grandfather or grandmother lived in Murch, and they walked through a paddock.
It was on private land.
It was on private land, and they walked through a paddock and could smell something, which they just thought it was an animal of some description, and they went shooting for that day and then came back and came across, I think they came across Abina first.
Yep.
And then they called the farmer whose farm it was.
Yep.
And he said, I could remember smelling something
the
other day. And then he took the police to Gary's body as well. So
would
have been pretty uneasy in Shep straight then, wouldn't it?
It was known, and then the grief at the grief had hit because it's a fact.
Yeah.
I suppose when someone's missing, you would have to live in a little bit of hope that there's
for sure.
They might be still okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't see either family on that day or the next few days. I went to the funerals, but I mean, it would have hit home and hurt like hell.
As a town, it would have been interesting too. Not in a good way, but as in that uneasiness of could it be someone else? Like as in someone from this town.
Yeah,
that had done that.
And Shep people were saying, well, the carnival was in town, the fruit pickers are in town, the joint was swelled and just clutching everywhere. No one knew.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty tragic, and
Absolutely.
it's sort of like what you said before. You know, the town was bopping all the time,
Yeah.
and it would have changed completely. I mean, I wasn't around. My dad was around then, and you know, read the book as soon as the book came out by Andrew Rule, the Cuckoo or whatever it was called. So, but it would have changed. Would have changed the atmosphere completely. You would have been
Absolutely.
scared to go out on a.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Everyone's had their door locked.
Yeah, parents
Kids
wouldn't
at
have
home.
Parents wouldn't have wanted to
Let their kids go out.
let their kids go, and you know, back then it was different too. Like as you said, as a 15-year-old, you'd go to these dances and stuff. That doesn't happen as much nowadays as what it used to, sort of thing. So there's a little bit more freedom and stuff. So those sort of things change the whole community and change the society and stuff like that. So, so we'll talk about the guy. So Raymond Edmunds. So he was on a farm over in Ardmona that he worked at, on the Gauns farm. So I believe that's my second cousin or something. My grandmother was a Gawn. So he worked on a farm over there, and he was a bit of a muso. And only young. How old was he then? He would have been young, wouldn't he?
Born in 44, so what's he, 22?
Yeah, so only a young bloke, and married with 3 kids, and he was
Married with 3 kids at 22.
Yeah. Married pretty young, I think. Or was he married? He
Yes,
was married,
he was.
wasn't he? Yeah.
And the children, his first wife, became pregnant almost the day she turned 16.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right, 3 children out at the Gawn place when he got home just before milking in the morning. And Leslie, the wife, I've met Leslie and spoke to her. And pretty much Ray Edmunds said to Leslie, let's go, we're going to go to ended up going to a place called Mayrung up between Denny and Finley, and said it's the back of nowhere, no one will know where we are.
Yeah.
And that's when he done the bunk, he shot through.
So she had a bit of an inkling that when she heard it on the radio in the dairy.
And then he'd come home and said, let's go.
Yeah, so she sort of had an inkling, but obviously it's... When they found the car, there was, I believe, the brother of Gary. When the dad took it home, because it was Gary's pride and joy, he went to wash it and clean it, and I believe Gary's father came out and said, "Don't do that." And they found a fingerprint on
2 prints on the driver's door that were clear, and they were saved and kept right over the next 19 years until they were identified up in Sydney.
So back then in those days, they didn't have computers where you could just punch in a fingerprint and find it. So it was all manually done. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so it was a lot harder to do back then. So so there was a lot of... I'm only going on what I've heard or read. There was a lot of sort of dodgy police work. Is that right? Or I might be wrong there.
I know as a kid, a lot of our teenagers were either physically harmed, not bashed, but might be given a smack in the ear and verbally abused because the cops were desperate. They wanted to find out who had done it, and they were just clutching it. And dodgy stuff. A lot of people will say, but didn't a policeman go out to the Gaunt's property some years later looking for a bloke? And there's a belief that did happen, looking for a Ray Edmunds, because we found out, or that was quickly found out, I'm talking double Dutch here, down where the bodies were found, they found parts of a Mossberg rifle. And it was identified coming from a Mossberg 352K series. And the cops back in those days, good police work, not dodgy police work, found out who had those particular rifles. And it seems as though the cops must have got told that the bloke named Ray Edmunds has got a Mossberg and he lives out Gaunt's farm. So they've gone out there to find him to say, have you got a Mossberg? And the Mr Reg Gawn said, oh, he did. He used to work here, but he's gone. He said, I wouldn't know where he's gone to. Oh, hang on, I've got it inside. And so he went in and came out with a piece of paper and said, look, his place, here it is, it's Mayrung in New South Wales. And the policeman that went out there said, "Oh, okay, thanks. We'll follow it up." Now, I don't think it was followed up.
Mm.
Had he been checked at Mayrung and maybe fingerprinted, we wouldn't be sitting here now.
Yeah, it would have been a different story, wouldn't
But
it?
back in those days too, there was a huge amount of jealousy between New South and Victoria,
Yeah.
New South and that Queensland. We all protected our own states type.
Yeah.
I think it was stupid, but it was a real thing. Or it could have been laziness by the policeman. He could have lost his piece of paper and said, "Oh, bugger it, it's nothing."
Yeah.
Who knows? We don't know. We'll never will know.
It was never documented that he went to the farm.
Could
though,
never
was
find
it?
anything.
Yeah.
But going on what the late Mr Reg Gorn told us,
Yeah, okay.
that
yeah.
yes, a policeman did come out inquiring about Ray Edmunds.
Yeah.
So it's after the murders, of course.
Without a doubt.
But would have maybe got him earlier. It's just sad.
The rumour being that over 2,000 odd kids were dragged in, and is that right? Or is that something somewhere along the lines? And
I couldn't give you
and-
numbers, Simon, but I know a lot of boys in particular, 16, 17 to 30, were brought in.
Yeah,
And I will say too that from knowledge, and it's not making this up, this is fact, a couple of years earlier there was what was called the market murders, the Footscray Wholesale Market.
oh yeah,
And the murders were solved pretty quickly by some pretty tough police work.
yeah, okay,
Say no more.
yeah,
Those same homicide detectives came up here to Shep and thought they could solve it by the same methods.
yeah,
But because no one knew what had happened here,
yeah,
Mm.
it wasn't solved.
yeah.
So that was frustrating too.
And it was a big thing too, like it made headlines out of Melbourne and stuff like that, where there was the abduction of the kids, I can't remember what it was called, was it the Barraville kids or something like that, or over in South Australia at the same time? The
Beaumont
Beaumont
children.
Beaumont children, yeah. So they'd gone missing, so that was massive headlines back then. And then this, this was huge. It took it off the main page of the Sun or the Herald or whatever it was back then, 2 papers, so... Yeah, it was a pretty big deal. So
Oh, well, it's a real tragedy. It's terrible
It
that
is.
for years and years, I mean, the Shep News, they're doing their job, but the families suffered because it'd be something in the paper that the police are flying to Innisfail or flying to Cairns or flying to Broome, to interview someone.
yeah,
And the families, the Medill and the Hayward families would see that, or someone at work would tell them, "Oh, gee, the police are still working," which is good that the police was
they're
still
still on it. Yeah,
on it, but given the families false hope, there could be a final ending to it. And
why would that stuff go to the paper? Why would how would the paper get hold of that?
well, back in the day, the news hounds lived in the police stations.
Oh, really?
Pretty much, yeah. They're in there all the time,
Yeah,
find out what's going on.
yeah, okay.
And, loose lips sink ships.
Sink ships,
What,
yeah.
what is it? Loose lips
Loose
sink,
lips
sink
sink
ships,
ships,
etc.
Yeah, okay.
So that's how it got out. So here we got a bloke that went to the concert friendly with both families and later on got involved with the task force and was present when Ray Edmunds was arrested.
So let's touch back on which is you're obviously talking about. So let's touch back on what after those he moved around. He went to Melbourne. Then a series of rapes were occurring down in Melbourne, in Donvale and stuff.
The first one we know for sure was 71 in Donvale.
Yeah,
And if anyone knows Melbourne, you get on Springvale Road and it's almost the spine of where he operated from, Donvale, Greensborough, right down to Edithvale, Aspendale.
yeah, okay.
And you go off Springvale Road and there was pretty close, we said at the end of it, there was 33 rapes that he committed.
And he was nicknamed the Donville Raper
Yeah.
back then, but then, which was given, who gave him that name? Was the police that gave him that name, or because Mr Stinky come from a journalist?
Correct.
Because he had that everyone said he had an odour about him. So whether it was like cow farm sort of stuff, is that correct?
Yes, not everyone, but it was enough to make it significant that, yes, he must have had an odour,
Yeah.
for sure. I don't know who called him the Don, but it would have been detectives from Doncaster or Greensborough or somewhere because they started to say, well, hell, this bloke's not done just this one, he's done more. So it started in Donvale, so he's the Donvale rapist.
Yep.
A lot of operations back then and even now are given names, so as you can say, well, that's that case.
Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong here. He took off to Mayrung after this, and then
After Shepparton.
and then he's made his way back down.
He's moved to Melbourne.
Like, this is obviously working this out later on.
Yeah.
He's made his way back down to Melbourne, still with the wife and kids that you know of, or he
yes,
ditched them?
at that stage he was, I believe. Is that right?
Leslie went with him to Mayrung and then somewhere else.
Yep.
But this is how tragic it was. She left the kids with him because she knew if she took the kids, he would find her.
He'd track her down.
So it breaks her heart
Yep.
to talk about it, but that's what she had to do.
Yep.
And yes, he ended up in Melbourne and he worked on the tramways. He became a night watchman. He became another dairy share farmer down out off of Pakenham Way.
And just turned into a complete predator. Well, the sound of it.
Absolute, predator. He was a specialist in some ways in that nearly every victim was a very attractive woman. And he just knew that they were there by himself or with their kids, that the husband was away, truck driving. And she said, my husband will be, one lady said, my husband will be, no, he won't.
So he was going to the houses.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know enough about this. Is this okay to talk about this? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just visioning that he's dragging women off the street.
No. So he would prowl their houses, and he'd be always barefoot. Is that correct?
Pretty much,
Yeah, he'd always be barefoot, so he'd be very silent.
And he'd sneak in, or he'd go to the door and...
No, he would sneak in either through a window, because back those days again too, your window would be cracked and stuff like that. So he would sneak in, and like absolute dog of a man. Like I'm talking, kids would be in the room, and he would threaten the wives and stuff.
How did he manage to do that so many times without getting caught? Was he good at just covering his tracks?
He was shot at one night.
Oh, unfortunately.
Husband came home and found his wife distressed and screaming, and she said he's just gone out the back. So the husband went out the back with his rifle, bing, and could see some movement. And he put a few shots over Edmund's head.
Yep.
How did he do it for so long? Because he was so determined to do it, I think.
Yeah, he obviously didn't leave any evidence at all.
Well, 5 times he left his prints.
Yeah, okay, but the system doesn't support.
Yeah,
we found him. The police found, and one other time he left his footprints, which footprints leave indent, had fingerprints as well.
Yeah, okay.
But it was his MO, what he said to the victims, and MO's modus operandi, his method of operation.
Okay,
and we identified his description and what he said to the women, method of entry.
Yep.
Carrying a knife.
Yep.
What he said. Did I say that?
Yeah.
So
can you say what he said?
I won't hurt you. I just want to make love to you.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Don't scream. Don't wake your kids up.
Okay.
All this sort of stuff. I just want to make love to you. He never swore, or it was never filthy language with the victims. He was quietly spoken. Some thought he had a north of England or perhaps Scottish accent.
Okay.
Which threw another spanner in the works.
Yeah.
The method of entry was unique. He was screwing. He was screwing the screws out.
Okay.
So he could pop the windows open and get in, and that was we found out. This is how much the work was done. We found out that was a particular method of entry into homes in England.
Right.
And with some of the victims saying he might have an English accent, we'd start to think he's a Pom.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
He's as Aussie as us blokes.
Yeah. So where were you at this stage? You were back in Shep on the task force back then, or
going to Melbourne, interviewing and meeting the women.
Yeah, okay. Because of the fingerprint that was left, you knew that was the same fingerprint as the 66 murders. Is that correct?
5. He left his prints 5 times, 5 different houses in Melbourne, and the last was 83. We knew he was still alive in 83. The same person that left prints on Gary Hayward's car was still alive in 83 in Melbourne.
At a house in Melbourne.
Where he'd committed a rape and left his prints.
Wow.
So, and when when the prints were identified, saying all these rapes are the same prints as Gary Hayward's car, that's when the balloon went up.
Yeah.
Whistle was blown, and we said, "Holy hell, we've got to get." That's when the task force was.
Yeah.
That's from 66 to 83.
Mm.
Yep.
That'd be real frustrating.
It was really exciting too. In that we were on the chase.
That you were getting close. Yeah, you had a sniff.
Yeah. And that's when I say the women we identified the 33, so we got those ladies together. Some just didn't want to relive it.
Hard, yeah.
And it's incredible to think all the women who were married at the time they were offended against, only one marriage had lasted. For whatever reasons, their marriages broke down. And that's another side issue
just
to
another
it.
sad story off the back of it.
But those girls were so good that they got together and they looked at each other and said, "You too," you know. So they weren't alone.
Yeah,
they
that's
felt
right.
some kind of a support. And they were the creation of a self-help group called VOCAL,
Okay.
Victims of Crime Assistance League.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
those girls got that going,
Okay.
which is good for, specifically for victims of crime, but specifically for rape victims.
Yeah.
Yep.
And those girls got together, and Dennis Hanna was absolutely sensational. He's off the senior sergeant. One of the girls saw a bloke pulling petrol at a service station in Greensboro, and she freaked out. She think, "God, that's him." It wasn't,
Yeah.
but it was his body. So that's the body we used to put
Okay.
the moulded head on top of.
Yeah. Okay. So you won't know about this, Ben. So I'll Google this up for you. So, Norm, can you just go through that what they actually did for this?
Well, the girls got the body, and all the girls said, "Yeah, geez, you know, he's overweight, bit flabby, white skin." And then got a sculptor came in and made a head and modelled Ray Edmunds' face
Yep.
and the shape of his head. Then we got a hairdresser in, and they styled his hair method of combing his hair, the colour.
Yep.
And Melbourne, we put on all the major highways of Melbourne, "Do you know this man?"
Yep. Billboarded.
And press were given descriptions of it. And all right throughout Victoria Police, there were special circulars made, "Do you know this man?"
So up on the big screen we put up, that's the model, yeah? Norm,
That's the bloke, the petrol service station attendant.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was the model they did, which is the first ever life-size model that they'd made in Victoria. Is that correct?
First time ever, I think.
Yeah.
Could be wrong, but... And the head is clay.
Yep.
It's modelled.
Yep.
And the hairdressing. And when is that an effigy? That was put up on overhead walkways in the major highways of Melbourne. "Do you know this man?" And the press were given it, of course.
Yep.
And mention was made of some of the girls saying he had an odour. And one of as Simon mentioned, I think a journo said, "Oh, let's call him Mr Stinky."
Yep.
And that's how that name was created.
Yeah.
Yep.
But those girls, and when we got him, our cops were watching him drive away from the house he slept in on the night before he was arrested.
Yep.
Driving away, and they're screaming out on the radio, "It's him! It's him!
Really?
It's bloody him, all right!" Because he was that.
Yeah.
That thing was just identical.
Yep.
You have a look at it when you got time.
Yeah.
It's so much him.
Yeah, it is.
And it's just so annoying
Yeah.
that it had to...
Take so long.
Well, it had to be that the Albury, New South Wales cops fingerprinted him.
Oh, yeah.
That's how he was
So
identified.
he...
Spelled that wrong.
How come he ended up getting fingerprinted there?
He was flashing himself,
Funny
sitting in
story,
his
that
car
one.
on a Saturday morning, Main Street of Albury, playing with himself.
Someone saw him, called the cops.
Having an Uncle Doug on the main street with a shop attendant
Well,
saw him, called the police, and then...
we can say, well, it sounds silly, but thank God he did that.
Yeah,
He got
that's
caught.
right. Yeah, thank God he was caught. So, but he got caught. So the police officers come in the back door of the shop and walked around behind the car.
Yep.
And tapped on the window.
Yep.
What are you doing,
Still
mate?
had a handful. Yep.
Yeah. And then took him back to the police station, fingerprinted him like arrested him, fingerprinted him, and then bailed him.
By now, how's fingerprinting?
So
Computers.
this is computers. So that fingerprint.
So the previous ones would have been able to get fed back into that new system. Would that be correct?
Let's call it the Melbourne rapes were put in, and then when it was computerised, they were sent to the central fingerprint place in Australia, which is Sydney.
Yep.
And the Sydney cops had those unidentified prints.
Yeah.
So his
linked,
prints
linked to crime, but they were in the system.
Yeah. So his prints were done manually as such, and then they got sent to Sydney. Is that right? And then they're entered into the computer system.
And then they would have went bingo.
The guy who was entering those.
Yeah.
He recognised the fingerprint and said because it was so unique.
Yeah, wow.
It had is that right? It had a strike or something through it, or
I nearly failed fingerprints when I was doing bayonet, so I'm not the person to speak to. But that's right. They were sent on the Saturday morning. He was arrested and fingerprinted.
Yep.
It took probably normal postage, quick postage to Sydney on the Wednesday. Bingo. And then that was the Wednesday, and then by on Thursday, we at Shepparton.
Yep.
And we were driving to Albury actually on that Thursday night.
Just happened to be going there?
To speak to the arresting police.
Okay.
The constables that arrested him on the Saturday morning.
Yep.
To get no idea what this bloke was like. And then we got told, don't worry, turn around, go to Melbourne, his car's in Mordialloc.
Right.
So we did a UE and went...
Oh, really? Was he still living in Melbourne then?
Yes.
What was he doing in Albury? Just went for an Uncle Doug.
He told his boss that he was going up to see his father, old Harold. But why was he in Albury?
Don't know.
No.
Yeah, okay.
So when they picked him up that day, did they hold him?
No.
No, he was bailed that day.
Really?
That's what we're saying.
Yeah,
so
because
they bailed him.
Yeah.
Because the fingerprints were manual.
Sorry, I didn't get that bit.
Got posted to Sydney.
Yeah, he'd
what
been
Norm
bailed.
said was Wednesday. He's out on bail that same day. Jesus. Fingerprints got sent to Sydney.
Yep.
Then get entered into the computer system from there. But the guy who actually enters them saw, hey, that's a unique fingerprint. I know that fingerprint because I put it in the system not long ago.
Yep.
And then contacted the police,
down in Melbourne.
Down in Melbourne, and said, hey, this
Still had
is
to go
the
and pick him
same.
up though.
Yeah, so that's what Norm's saying. He's now back in Melbourne.
Yeah, that's right. You're on your way there. They've turned around and sent you to Melbourne. Okay.
That's something I forget. I don't know whether we asked him, but he got bailed from Albury on the Saturday dinner time or afternoon, and he actually went to court on the Monday morning in Albury and got fined $400 and got his receipt.
Yep.
Went back to Melbourne and went to work on the Tuesday.
Mm.
Yeah, at suburb of Hyatt, and that's where he was arrested from.
Yep.
So you sat on him Thursday night, is that right? Like you were watching?
Our police found his car, and then they saw him get in the car and drive off, obviously to work. And that's when the car was found in the driveway of this house. That's when we were told that the car that he was in Albury in was in Melbourne, so we went straight to Melbourne. There's another story. We were panicking if we get him and arrest him. Back in those days, we only had 6-hour interview times with offenders. That's another story.
Yeah, okay.
But as I say, the cops that had followed him from when he left home to driving, they're screaming out on the radio. I'll never forget it. It's him, it's him.
Yep.
And sure enough, it was him.
Mm.
Yep.
So you there when he was arrested?
Yep.
So where'd they pick him up when he got to work? Or
sitting at his desk at a place in factory area of Hyatt.
Yep.
Yes, gents, can I help you?
Oh, wow.
Really?
And that was him. You know, as soon as you look at him, you think, oh, God, geez, that's you all right.
Yeah. So what... You obviously arrested him there and then. Where did he went back to the Melbourne station?
Mordialloc.
So he went back to Mordialloc, and you went there as well?
Yeah, and then he was taken to St Kilda because it's better condition, more room to interview.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mordialloc was a shoebox.
Yep.
Dennis Hanna and Kenny Mansell stayed with him at St Kilda, and I went to where I went to the house in Mordialloc where he'd come from, and then went to where he'd been boarding. He was boarding at a house in Springvale bloody Road of all places, but living with his second wife in Mordialloc.
Oh, Jesus.
So yeah, he'd remarried at this stage, and
So the
A Shep girl.
really?
Are you serious?
I'm telling you.
Oh wow!
This
You
is
don't need to mention the name.
No.
I can find that out, but that's okay. So
at this point. The cops had picked him up and taken him back, and that was he just doing the whole "what do you want me for"?
Pretty much. And I remember there's a chap named Brian Norton, inspector, with a very distinctive English accent. He said to him, "I'm telling you, these fingerprints I've just taken are your fingerprints found on the car that was at a murder scene and all these rapes." And Ray Edmunds looked at him and said, "Not me, not me." But then the penny dropped. And he said, "Look, my wife's working in Coles in the city, and you're obviously I'm going to be charged. Get me a priest, and we'll see what happens." And so a priest was called, and a priest came. Priest spoke to him in private. The priest came out. Dennis Hanna and Kenny Mansell went in to the room, and he confessed. He said,
what did he confess to back then?
The murders.
Just the murders?
And yes, I've done a lot of rapes, but I really can't remember which ones. But yeah, okay. I'm gone. I'm like a sick dog. I should be shot.
Yeah.
I should be put down. They're the words he said.
Is this literally within the first day of getting back to the station?
Yep.
They only had 6 hours to interview him.
Within the first couple of
can't
hours.
fathom
Yeah.
that. It's taken
20 years.
20 years to get this bloke, and within under 6 hours he's...
The pennies dropped though, because his prints. He knew he'd done it.
Yeah.
And to this day, the only version we've got of what happened is from him.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Well, you can't, obviously, of the murders, there's no one else to know anything about it, so...
And what he says is just rubbish. But he committed, he admits killing the two kids.
Yeah.
And he's in jail forever, we hope.
No, he won't be getting out now.
Is that a fact?
Yeah, he won't get out. He
That was my next question.
4 years ago, he admitted another 7 or 8 rapes, so he got another
righto.
23
Okay.
years, and he's 74.
Is that because he was?
now.
Is that because he was close to getting out and he knew he needed to stay in there?
Well, I don't know. Like, he's probably
Was
wants to
why
clear
would you-
some of his conscience, but
Our cold crime squad from the rape section had been contacted by one of his original victims.
Yep.
And said, "What about us? He's been charged with 5 of us, but
Yep.
what about us?"
Yep.
She's a bit of an activist, this girl, and so it got re-dug up.
Okay.
And cold squad detectives through Zoom and bloody all this sort of stuff. And to Edmund's credit, if you can give him any, is he's confessed to them and said, I want to put people to rest. I don't want them to worry about it anymore. Yes, I did them.
so
Right.
that was 2019, and he got another 23 years.
Jesus, that was only
So-
June 2019.
Yeah, so that and he got another.
he's done for. That's all right.
He got another 23 years. So he's a governor's choice, mate. He's never coming out.
Well, let's hope so, Simon. But when I was a kid and joined the police force, there was a bloke in jail called William John O'Mealy. Google that when you get a chance.
Yeah.
And he was in jail forever.
Didn't
When I
know.
was in the police force, he got out.
Really?
Yep. Murdered a policeman named George Hodgson out
Wow.
Caulfield
Okay.
in 52 or something.
Yeah.
But anyway, he should be in jail till he dies.
He would back to 2019. He would have been 75 or something, which is then going to put him another 23 years, which is going to be 98 years old. He'll be dead by then, hopefully.
Yeah.
So what happened once he confessed? What went on then? What
he agreed to an extension of time for further interview. So we had him, and he did it again. So we had him for a total of 18 hours, 3 lots of 6.
yeah.
in that time, through the brilliance of Dennis Hanna, we brought him back up to Murch East, and he says he'd never been there before. He just drove in the dark, and that's where it happened.
Yeah.
He drove us exactly to Cassidy's Lane, the property where the bodies were found. I know he's been there before.
Yeah.
And we did a reenactment with our big lights, and he directed us as to how he did it. I played the part of behind a Medill, getting out of the car and running, and he was clubbing me with a stick. And that's all on police footage, etc.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether he was charged in Shep or not, but he was taken back to Melbourne because he's high profile. He's, double murder and all these rapes and everything. And the sad part is he told Dennis Hanna, Dennis Lucas, Kenny and myself that he'd come out for further interview when we went down at Easter. And we went down for the next remand, and he said, "Look, boys," and he did. He said, "Look, fellas, I would, but on legal advice, I'm not. I'm not going to come out." Because he said to us when we arrested him, "Yeah, I've done lots of rapes, but I really can't remember because there were so many." And he's running each into the others. He was charged with the ones where fingerprints were left, or I think even when one of the victim's husbands put shots over his head, he remembered that one.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
And so that was also, I think, without me knowing about it, a tool used to get rid of the 6-hour rule.
Yeah, okay.
Because our hierarchy said, how can you interview someone over 20-year-old murders in 6 hours?
Yeah, correct.
Because back then, the offender, the suspect, had every right to say, "Nah, you've had your time," and they did. Look at the watch and say, "Boys, your time's running out.
Yeah.
I'm going home in a minute."
Wow.
The difference, I suppose, with him, did he know that? Because he'd never been caught. He'd done all this horrific stuff and never been caught.
Obliged to tell him,
Oh, okay.
"Look, we've only got 6 hours with you, and when time's running out, we're going to be applying to the magistrate for you to agree to a further extension. And Ray, look, in the best interests of everybody, you've got to agree. Do you agree?" "Yeah, I agree." So bang, that's how it was done.
Did you feel obliged to punch him in the head?
No, because we wanted to get the confessions and get them so as that you're not going to be accused of any underhand work or not going to lose the confession. Or
That must be so frustrating and hard for you guys to do that, especially yourself when you're doing that reenactment. Like,
That's all I'm thinking about now.
like you just. But I mean,
No,
as a police officer, you've got to do the right thing.
I don't think it was in Kenny, Dennis Lucas, Dennis Hanna's or my mind at any stage to give him a smack or call him a mongrel or anything. It was just...
I suppose that's in your mindset, though, and your training and everything like that. You would know that.
Oh,
For me and Ben, we just want to crack him, sort of thing. That's what.
Can we
the
get
first
you a
thing
cup
we
of
do.
tea? Would you like a smoke? He didn't
Yeah.
didn't smoke, I don't think, but didn't. Would you like a drink of water?
Yeah.
And how you going? This...
I've watched a couple of crime things with Ron Iddles and stuff. So one of Victoria's best homicide detectives, and he says it's in your best interest to make them friends with you because they will then communicate a lot better.
As Norm said, bit of sugar.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's dead right. Get that. You're doing a job. I'm the cop. You're the bad guy.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to treat you awfully. I want you.
Cooperate.
Yeah.
Which is so different to
Takes
what
us-
you would want to do.
Yeah,
Do you
no,
know
that's
what
what I said.
Like,
I couldn't do it.
It's amazing. Like that.
Hat off to the people who do.
Yeah. So
that's the sad part of man. We wanted him to come out and run us around all the places we knew he'd been to, and he could have been charged there and then. But a sort of a sweetheart deal was done. I mean, he's very, very rarely, and Google this, not too many people plead guilty to murder.
Yeah,
It's always not guilty through insanity or whatever.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
he actually pleaded guilty to the 5 rapes
Yep.
and the 2 murders. He pleaded guilty. I mean, he's locked in the bag. We've got him.
Yep.
And the poor girls that he raped that didn't get their day in court, it was explained that, look, he's going to jail forever. We know he's did it. So this is a sort of a sweetheart deal we've arranged with him So
Yep.
leave it be. But as it turned out, just as Simon says, in 2019, he pleaded guilty to another 20-something. The remaining outstanding...
Yeah. He got another 23 years. I believe he only... I'll Google this back up. I believe he only agreed to another...
9 or something.
9 or something, yeah. 7
Now
or 9.
that's very big and honourable of him, but, I mean, why... are we going to talk about unsolved New South murders?
Me and you now?
Yeah.
We can do that, yeah.
There's relevance, is there?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
I mean,
well,
you talk about
we don't know
Albury.
this.
Albury. Why
Okay.
did he go to Albury?
Yeah.
Why was he sitting in the... I mean, he'd been to Albury before. He was a slaughterman at Wodonga Abattoirs some years before he got arrested.
Yep.
Well, of course, before... And there was a famous case of Miss Albury showgirl, Bronwyn Richardson,
Okay.
dumped in the Murray River, and Elaine Wilson up at Tokemwell in 1980.
I remember that.
That's the beautiful woman found with her head almost severed off, and her husband finds her snagged in the river next morning in the boat with his
daughter, is
with
it?
his 6-year-old daughter, and the shock of seeing his beautiful wife and getting her into the boat, heart attack,
And then
dead.
he passed away as well.
So there's little girl circling around in the Murray with mum and dad both dead. We know Edmunds was in. You've heard of Yulupner Island.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
We know that Edmunds was there that night,
Are you serious?
Mm.
and we know Edmunds was a slaughterman.
Yep.
But Bina had down at Murch East, some of her clothing was found very similar to the way in which Miss Albury showgirl's clothing was found on the banks of the Murray.
Okay.
So those clothes were folded to
In a fashion,
in
yeah.
a fashion. They were folded up and sort of put aside as such. So yeah.
So are they the only two?
That I know for sure. I've got to say right now for sure.
Any other Victorian unsolved murders of
Well,
that era?
I've thought, but you've got to be able to prove it.
Yeah, but there's no similar like MOs or anything like that.
Tynong North, have a Google of that.
Okay.
There's 6 bodies, female
6.
down there. And our man, worked at a place called Officer, which is over the Princess Highway from Tynong North.
So six bodies over a period of time. Just
That were murdered,
Mm-hmm.
raped and murdered.
Oh, murdered, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know about the rape because decomposition, etc.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yep.
So
And who'd know? Eloise Wallage, who'd know?
Yeah.
He's the only one that would know. And he, like, to his credit, he's said I don't want to have these victims suffer anymore. Let's
Yeah.
put a closure to it.
Because they're the only ones that they said there's prints at that scene, though.
no, so he'd already got done for those
That's what
5, but then he's come out in 2019 and said, I've done
Yeah, but that's only
these
rape,
amount.
though. But that's what I mean.
Yeah, but yeah, no, he hasn't admitted to any other murders. That's what Norm's saying. He's like obviously has just said that he believes there's two murders he definitely did,
Oh, well,
and then there's the possibility of another 6, which
And there's probably more that I can't right off the top say who.
yeah,
But I've often, I've spoken to Ron Iddles and others that worked in the cold case homicide squad,
Yeah.
putting him up as a suspect. And you've got to be able to lock him into, but we have locked him into Yulupner Island.
Yeah.
We have locked him into Albury. We've locked him into Tynong North because it's so close to where he was living for
Yeah.
for so long.
So not enough evidence for those though to actually convict.
No, and unfortunately, a lot of cases, the only way you're going to get a conviction is through a confession
Yeah,
because all the evidence is gone.
yeah.
that stuff been thrown at him?
It's been not by me.
To your knowledge, though?
No.
So-
I went to Port Phillip with 2 New South Wales detectives to interview him over the 2 New South ones,
Right.
and we didn't get put through the gate
Really?
because you've got to tell the prisoner that there's police here to interview them, and they can refuse to be interviewed.
Really?
What?
How's that work?
That was the law.
But,
But nowadays, the law is still the same in that if you get interviewed you get dragged into a police station to be questioned, you can refuse to answer.
Yeah.
True.
That's always going to be your right. But even in prison, they can flatly refuse to be interviewed.
So
I
he
think
never got that opportunity to...
not the time I went down. I think that might have changed, whereas they can't refuse to be interviewed, but they can still refuse to
say
talk.
anything.
talk. Yeah, so what's the difference, you know?
Yeah. Oh, I just thought out of interest if someone had tried
I
to
wrote a letter.
spook him a little bit into...
Yeah.
I wrote a letter appealing to his soft heart. If you ever feel like confessing, you know, let me know.
Yeah. It's worth try.
There's an ironic thing. I just picked it up reading something the other day that when we went down at Easter to get him out to do the runaround for all the unsolved rapes, he said, who's the ones that went and spoke to my father? Dennis Lucas and myself were, and he said, he put his hand out.
To who, you guys?
Yes, and thanks for the way you treated my father. So, you know, it makes you think, is he ready to confess to other stuff?
Yeah.
So we live in that hope too. But as Simon says, he's bloody 70, nearly 80.
Well, he was 75 back in 19, so...
He's still living and breathing. Well, you'd think you'd be still trying to push him at some point.
Yeah, I suppose you'd
Still
know
got to
better.
get closure for someone.
Well, you would hope so, and you'd hope he'd have enough decency to
But
do that.
there's a law stopping that.
But, you know, the man's not all there, mate. Like to do that in the first place. Like,
Oh, yeah, clearly,
you know
but
what I mean? So
you just never know.
He's a predator, a sick animal that I think it's similar to what maybe, let's say, a heroin addict or a drug. You've just got to have it no matter what. I'm going to have that hit.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think when he's seen a woman that's attractive to him, he says, I've got to have her.
Yeah.
I've got to have sex with her. And I'll be very careful not to get caught, but you know, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
It's like an addiction. I really do think that, because he was so meticulous with knowing that, stalking that's the right word.
Yeah.
Knowing that the husband or boyfriend was not going to be home.
You've got to do some homework to know that.
Well, he was the night watchman and had no control.
Yeah.
So
You know, he was a night watchman and had never been fingerprinted to carry a bloody pistol.
Yeah, really.
He got through the system.
Yeah.
He attacked his eldest girl's girlfriend who stayed over in their house sexually.
Yeah.
They went to the police. The daughter and her friend went to the police to make a complaint, and he was never questioned. Again, he got through the system. Somehow or other.
It's ironic, really, that he's done so much and got through that system so much. And it took him to, like, the Albury situation.
he didn't touch anyone except for himself.
Yeah.
To get caught.
That's what took him to get caught. It's really ironic.
And in a place where it was mandatory fingerprinting.
So, yeah, I mean, his luck caught up with him, sort of thing, and he...
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the luck changed.
Yeah. Which obviously has to happen too. That you can't continue to do that and get away with what he's done. So, how was it when you convicted him? Like, how did you feel? Like, you and the Shep Task Force and everything. What was it? Big relief? Was it?
Oh, the satisfaction there, that was for sure. I mean, and it was comfort for the Medill family. I think Charlie had passed, Gary's mum had passed years ago.
Yeah.
There was comfort for Gary's younger brother, Alan.
Yeah.
It was a comfort that, yes, the cops had never given up. They'd kept going, and we've got the man that did it. It was certainly that. I know the girls in Melbourne certainly felt good that he was in jail and wouldn't be able to do it to someone else.
Yeah.
We, as a group, felt proud that we'd done so much. We felt pleased that our inspector over at Benalla let us do it.
Yeah.
He had pull with Melbourne to tell Melbourne bosses, yes, let the Shep boys do it because they know what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas other investigations, Melbourne could say, oh, no, they're not doing it. The specialist squad are going to do it. So there's a lot of satisfaction. lot of frustration with not being able to get him out, all that sort of stuff.
Mm.
But empathy, because I knew both families, and Ian Urquhart's sister in particular, empathy and feelings are towards them all the way through.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
she would have been, because Ian had passed away at this stage. He died in a car accident. But the sister, who was pretty close with, because she pretty much raised Ian, I believe, is that right? Ian's mother had passed away or something.
Yep.
So she had a really strong bond with Ian and stuff. So she would have been
just keep
satisfied that his name had been cleared. Like it wasn't him.
Yes.
We found the guy who did it. So I suppose it doesn't repair what had happened, but it's at least the name was clear.
Yes, and I'll always tell if anyone ever mentions in the store, Norm, you're involved in that arrest of Mr Stinky. I say, yeah, and I nearly always bring up, and how sad is it that Ian Urquhart suffered so badly, and the victims left behind by his sisters and family, Gary Hayward's family. It's so sad for them to be reliving it. When it shouldn't have happened.
It shouldn't have. No, it shouldn't have. It's a tragic. Is the family still in Shep, or they've sort of moved on and got away, or?
I think Alan's over Lake Rowan Way, last I knew.
Yeah.
Mine his sisters are in Shep.
Yeah, okay.
Brothers out Bundoora Way.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And cousins and, extended family, etc. They're all still in Shep.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're glad he's caught, and we're glad he's going to rot. Yeah. So I hope he doesn't do easy time either. So it's a pretty extraordinary story, Norm. It's great to actually hear it from. I've listened to podcasts, about 3 podcasts about it. I've read a book, obviously, but it's good to actually hear it from someone who was there and there on the night, and then got to actually catch him, which is fantastic. So. It's pretty good police work, mate.
Oh, it's a bit unique, isn't it? I guess. It'll stay with me forever because I knew both, and we've all lost loved ones, but not like that. No. I mean, it's just awful.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. Well, he's caught, he's in jail, and I hope he rots there.
Yep.
So.
I like, just on finishing, Simon, to make mention of the wonderful, really brilliant police work led by Dennis Hanna, I hope Dennis listens to this one day. He's down Curramborough way. Lukey's still with us. Kenny Mansell's passed, sadly.
Yeah.
And then it was fantastic work by the cops and very professionally done. And the fingerprint bloke, Andy Wall, who's on that Crimes That Shook Australia thing.
Yep.
Andy is filmed talking about it. The exhilaration he must have got sitting in his desk when he got the email from Sydney. God, Mr. Stinky, he's still alive. And, then letting the detectives know, and then the balloons, come on, quick, right, let's get together.
Yeah.
And it was freakish that Thursday night, two of us were on leave, 2 were at work, and anyway, it was freakish that the 4 of us that were working for so long were together. One of us could have been anywhere and missed out, but as it turned out, the luck changed. The good guys got some luck after such a long time.
Yeah. So I hope the families have a bit of ease that he's locked away. So we try to be as respectful as we can to the families, and we wish them the best. But it's certainly a tragedy. So
good on you, Simon. Thanks for that.
Did you work on any other high-profile cases, or were you in Shepparton when was it Michelle Birmingham? Buckingham. Were you around then? That's
a sad situation because yes, I was.
Yeah.
But we were almost totally committed to.
Okay.
And we were not in Shep very much.
Yeah, okay.
And it was left to the two Ds in Shep to help the homicide. Had there been had us 4 been in Shep permanently, we may have been able to. So that was another long years later, murder case solved.
Do you know about that one?
Ron Iddles
I've
got
heard
involved
of it,
in.
but I don't know. I can't remember what happened.
So Michelle was murdered. I don't know what year that was. Normal, I can't remember. I could probably Google it now, but it was it 80s or?
Yeah, it'd be 20 odd something years, and the offender
Yeah.
was caught 20 years later.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she was
16-year-old.
16, stabbed, murdered, tragic, dumped on the side of the road. They couldn't find anyone who did it. 20 years later, 25 years later, a reporter from the Shep News, a young, just an up-and-coming journalist,
Tammy Mills.
Tammy Mills,
Yep.
there you go, contacted Ron Iddles and said, again, Ron Iddles, a homicide.
Yep.
Ron Iddles at this stage was working the cold case
Yep.
stuff, and she said, I'm going to do an article about this, being in Shepparton, and have you got any information? Ron pulled the file. She said, can you have a look at it for me? She wrote a story. Ron had a look at it. 2 days later, he rang her back and said, I reckon we can solve this.
Yeah.
And I think they had it done within a week or something, didn't
Really?
they? I can't quite remember that, but
The Shep News prompted the memory, the conscience of the star witness.
I was going to say someone's
someone's
a
rang
witness.
in. That's right. So someone's rang in. Ron obviously interviewed them. Someone interviewed him, I would imagine, or was it just from the phone call?
The star witness whose conscience was pricked contacted homicide, because that's what I think Tammy Mills' story said. Any information, contact Melbourne Homicide Cold with a phone number. And so this bloke rang, and Ron Iddles happened to speak to him and made an appointment to meet him up here in Shep.
Yep.
Got the story, and Ron Iddles went to Queensland and got the offender, and he confessed.
He confessed.
Brought him back, and he's doing life, I think.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Shep's had some terrible ones like Rocky Irea and others, etc. I mean, Shep, because it's such a... Well, it's Shep, isn't it? I mean, we're a tough town. We have been, and we have had some bloody awful murders.
Mm-hmm.
It's terrible. Norm, thanks for coming in, mate. You've been very generous with your time, and I know we're going back a bit, and it probably pulls on a couple of heartstrings, some of those memories. But it's, like I said before, it's good to get a Shepparton perspective on it, and the right results and everything came out. So, with all our podcasts, Norm, we finish with on a lighter note. It's okay. So we finish with 3 questions.
Yeah.
So we'll forget about all the bad stuff. We're going to start with our first question for you, mate. So, what was your first car?
69 Datsun 1000 Fastback. Nissan Motors from RS&AR Travascus.
Really?
And I went to school with Ken Muston.
Did you?
And the boy XL,
Yeah.
there's an XL road between here and Benalla.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh, the Extons.
Exton.
Exton, yeah.
What did I say?
Exton, XL.
Yeah, I know who
So
you're talking
Exton
about.
is in our...
Yeah.
our
Yeah. he's got something with 2
He's got it
sponsors.
with everyone.
Exton,
So,
as in sponsor.
yeah.
I reckon a relation of them played with Shep United.
Wow.
And,
Okay.
And that's, as I say, I went to school with Ken Muston.
Yeah. So I worked at...
Yes.
Well, then I worked at Travascus Nissan. I worked at Ken Muston's. And Ian Exton is a customer of mine. So look at that. How's that for...
Small world, isn't it?
Did you have a name for that car?
No, I don't think I did.
No, it's just a car.
Loved it though,
Loved
Jesus.
it.
I paid cash for it. I worked at the cannery for 18 months on good money. Paid $25.25 on the road in 1969.
So 25. What do you mean?
$2,525 cash.
Yeah, okay.
Paid for it on the road, registered. Went like the clappers. Geez, I loved it.
It's classic. I love it.
What's your favourite food?
Silverside with all the trimmings.
Really? Who cooks it? You or?
Oh, Lizzie's a good cook.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love all my meats and roast lambs and yeah. But if I was having my last meal on earth, it'd be Silverside, mashed potatoes, cabbage, carrots, and Worcestershire mustard sauce.
Whoa.
No, Holbrook's.
Holbrook sauce. Mustard sauce.
It's all over it, bloke.
Fantastic. All right, last one. Some people find this quite hard. 3 people you could invite for dinner, dead or alive, any era, that you would like to have sit down with your silver side.
Oh, God, I'm going to be here all night.
Unfortunately, Simon will wait.
Me mum and dad, 4 people.
Okay, I'll give you 4.
My mum and dad.
Yep.
My daughter I never knew.
Yep.
And Anthony, who died a few years ago.
Okay, your
That's
son
fair.
Anthony.
Son Anthony.
Okay,
You're going to make me cry now.
good 4.
No,
Fantastic.
That's a fair call.
That's who I'd like to have
Yeah,
back in my life. Anyway.
Yep. That's fantastic. Ben
Good
said
on
he
you.
wants to have Henry VIII.
I don't even know who that is.
We'll make a bit of light now too.
Very
Norm, thank you very much for
Thank
coming
you.
in. It's very much appreciated. Thanks for everything you've told us. It's been a fantastic story. We appreciate it very much, and I hope the listeners get something out of it. So,
Thank you, Simon, and I wish you blokes well with what you're doing here. It's local content, and I think it's a good thing.
Appreciate it.
thank
Good on you,
very
boys.
much.
Thank you.
Before we go, Season 2 of Two Blokes from Down Under is brought to us by Ken Muston Automotive for all your motoring needs. Pop down and see the team for Isuzu Ute, Ram trucks, MG, Jeep, Subaru and Mercedes-Benz. That's Ken Muston Automotive, 215 Benalla Road, Shepparton. And this episode is brought to you by Extons of Benalla, proudly family owned and operated since 1952. Extons are your one-stop for all your earthworks, bulk haulage and equipment sales. You can find them at 85 Gilly Street, Benalla, or jump onto their website at extons.com.au. There you go, gang. Another episode of True Crime. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. Ben certainly learned a lot about
Loved
it.
it.
So, fantastic.
Like,
So
for the right reasons.
for the right reasons.
Yeah,
So,
of course.
thanks, gang. We'll talk to you next time. I hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Bye for now.
Yeah, show him I can still rap though. Now I'm in the game, I was on the bench. First I was renting, now I'm collecting rent. First it with the Beamer, now I want the Benz. Spending all the back like here I go again.